All right, we're going to get started. We have several people in, more people may be coming along. Welcome to MTSS and Multi-Tiered System of Supports 1.5. We're looking at class-wide intervention. That's what 1.5 means. So we're going to get started. I'm not going to, I want to make sure that we have time for dialogue. Please make sure you enter into the chat with comments, with questions. That's what this is all about. It's not about me, it's not about sit and get. This is about you asking questions, interacting. So please interact at any time. I'll be asking questions. I prefer that you unmute and say something, but you're not obligated to that. You can use the chat. So anyway, my name is John Purcell. I'm with the IEP Technical Assistance Center. I'm a technical assistance specialist. You probably saw Patrick's name on the intro slide. Patrick's not able to be with us, but that's okay. He left me in charge. I'm not so sure that was smart, but I'll do my best. So welcome for being here tonight. We're going to do a quick lightning 30,000 foot view of the MTSS framework. Then we're going to really dive into what MTSS 1.5 is, and then look at what that looks like in practice. So today, the why is, why do we need Tier 1 interventions? Tier 1, MTSS, we're going to talk about in a minute, Tier 1 is indispensable. If we have effective Tier 1, our Tier 2 supports, our Tier 3 supports should be rapidly fading. We should not need the extent of the Tier 1 or Tier 2, Tier 3 supports that I see in a number of schools, or a number of schools that kind of have that dilemma about how do I provide all these supports for students? Well, why do you have that many students that need Tier 2? So the reasons why we do need Tier 1 interventions, the more we intervene there, support students, the less we'll have problems in the future. Provide an overview of class-wide intervention to support all students. That's the how. Also, the how is the strategies for you to address these academic and behavior skills. So we'll look at the why, the how of an overview, the how of some strategies, and then the outcome to enable you to use time and resources efficiently while producing a positive impact for students. That's what it's about. It's about making sure that students are successful. We do have a Padlet. It is available. You can see the URL there. You can also take a photo of that while it's on. I'm pausing if you want to take a quick picture. All right, 30,000 foot view of MTSS multi-tiered system of supports. These are the 6 domains in MTSS, the MTSS framework. The 6 are interdependent and independent: leadership, capacity building for staff, making sure that they have the training they need, communication, collaboration. All of those are important, and they work independently as well as interdependently. Think of your body systems. Your heart has a function; it must do its function independently, but it also is interactive with respiratory system. So it must do its job on its own, and it then must work with other systems. That's what MTSS does. These 6 domains have to do what they need to do independently, and also as they work together. Let's look at the last 3. Tonight, we're talking about the instruction and intervention domain. We'll just touch on that, and 1.5 is part of that. But to my point from what I just said, when you're looking at the instruction and intervention, we're looking at data. We're looking at the benchmark data. We're looking at diagnostic data. We're looking at progress monitoring data. We're having that collaboration and communication in our PLCs. And as part of that PLC, we're in a problem-solving process. We're looking at student data. First thing we're asking with student data is, what did we do as teachers? How did you teach that lesson? Look at my data. I only had 40% of the students. What did you have? Well, you had 90%. Wow. So what do you do? So we're reflecting on the data, reflecting on our own practices as we look at that data, as well as reflecting on what we know of the students, how the student performed, digging into doing some error analysis on how the student performed. So data is critical. But again, tonight, that focus on multi-tiered systems of support, specifically instruction and intervention. I don't see any questions or comments in the chat. Are there comments in the chat?
Nope. Everybody just said hello and just their hellos. Nothing
Okay.
yet.
I ran through that quickly because that's the 30,000 foot view, and I'm not a fan of heights, so I want to get off that real quick. Tier 1, universal academic and behavior. This is the foundation. MTSS is a preventative, first and foremost, a prevention framework. If you take nothing away from this, we have to have a strong core tier 1 framework or foundation. And that means behaviorally, setting the stage as a school with the culture, setting the stage in my classroom. What are the expectations? Do I create a welcoming classroom? Because the more organized we are as teachers, the more apt students are to be on task and engaged because we're on task and engaged. So let's look at specifically at what tier 1 should include. First of all, and evidence-based practices and programs. At least 80% of the students should be meeting that benchmark. That being said, there's a thing called the 80-20 dilemma. We want to make sure we don't get caught in that lowering expectations. Well, as long as 80% are meeting it, we're fine. Let's not be satisfied with just that 80%. We always want to be reflecting on our practices, instructional practices, setting the stage for positive behavior supports, and shooting for more than 80%. And teachers don't do that, but there is this thing called the 80-20 dilemma, and it is real in some cases. Tier 1, the foundational components are, what do we expect students to learn? That is, what must they know and be able to do? For that, we have to be crystal clear on what those standards are, those essential skills within those standards. What must they know? What is the understanding they must have? We have to be clear on that. What prerequisites for that understanding must they have? A pretest, a pre-assessment. What do they know? What don't they know? When I'm planning that instruction, I want to be crystal clear on what they must know and the skills they must develop. What must they be able to do as a result of my instruction? Secondly, and it's not in here, it's not number 2, but I say secondly, how do I design instruction so that happens? So what must they know and be able to do? I'm clear on that, but how do I design the instruction and the environment so the students are learning? So I'm crystal clear on what they must know and be able to do. I've thought about and designed a lesson or lessons and the environment so students can learn. Now, how will I know they've learned? This is where we get the assessment data. And with the checkpoints, I would suggest that you look at the item specs in your schools, if you haven't already. When you get the item specs for the standards, let's say in your checkpoint 1, checkpoint 2, whatever, you know the standards they must, the focus will be on certain standards. We know that. They've given us that information. When you look at the item specs, it will show you what at proficiency looks like. So how will I know they've learned? I may set up assessments in my classroom. As far as I can see, they're doing fine. They're learning. They're doing great. But then they take an assessment, formative assessment, and they're not. They haven't reached proficiency. Well, that's because I didn't know what proficiency looks like. How must they demonstrate that? Even what will the questions be like? Multiple choice? Will it be a hot link? So we must be clear on not only what they must know and be able to do, how I'm going to design that instruction, but how can I design assessments within that instruction so I know they're on track to be successful and can demonstrate that knowledge and those skills in the same way that they will be assessed on the summative or the big test. So how will we know that they've learned? We make sure we're clear on that. Again, those item specs are worth their weight in gold. And then how will we respond when students do not make the progress, or if they've already made the progress? A lot of time our high ability students are left out. And so we want to make sure that we are clear on what we will do, how we will respond. Again, Tier 1 or MTSS is a prevention or a proactive model, not a reactive model, but it is a responsive model. So we're going to be proactive in our planning. We're going to rapidly respond when students need it. But boy, we don't want to be in a situation where we're on our heels and we're reactive rather than making sure that we plan ahead of time and we're clear on what we must do for students and how we expect them to perform. The assessments that we look at in Tier 1 is of course, our universal assessment. And that's benchmarking assessment. What's not on here is the diagnostic assessment. When we give that universal assessment, say you're looking at MTSS, or excuse me, at NWEA, get my letters mixed up. When you're looking at NWEA and you look at the numbers, that tells you who. When you start grouping students, that tells you who should be where, but it doesn't tell you why. So getting to that why, that diagnostic, or following up on that assessment with formative assessments to ferret out what students need specifically within those groups that you start dividing into is critical. I know you know that, but it's not on the slide. So you have that universal, you have the diagnostic, and then of course you have the progress monitoring along the way. We want to make sure that in Tier 1, we have that evidence-based core instruction. The program we select must have a basis in success. It has to be an evidence-based program. And then we implement that with fidelity. Fellows, that's an overused word. Basically, it's implementing it as intended. And fidelity would mean that, and this is particularly important when you get to a Tier 2 program, implementing it with fidelity. When a physician gives you an antibiotic and it says take every so many hours and for so many days, and so you skip a day here, I forgot about it, and I didn't take it twice yesterday, and it doesn't have the efficacy that it was in. It's not going to have the efficacy as it was designed and intended. So we want to make sure that we implement the instruction within that program with fidelity. Tier 2, supplemental or targeted. Tier 1 is all students. All capital ALL. All students are provided that core instruction. When I talk to some schools that are struggling with their LRE, they have too many students that are being pulled out, so to speak. That's a problem. And we one time had a student in a school of mine, and he was phenomenal. His listening comprehension was amazing, and his background in history was amazing. And he would debate the socks off of you in U.S. history. He knew things I didn't know. That's because he was in core instruction. He was soaking up everything. Could he read the text? If you gave him a 5th grade text, no. He struggled in that area. That's where we provide later on, and I'm looking at a student in special education now, which is not what we're talking about. But what I am talking about is making sure all students are in that Tier 1, because that's where he and all students need that grade level, those grade level essential skills to be successful. In fact, in federal law, when it comes to, especially in court cases, the Enroute decision, it makes it clear that students making, in special education, for example, making progress in the general education curriculum. So Tier 1 is all. This is for some, it is the core in addition to supplemental. Again, 70 to 80% of the students are improving in the performance. Just like before, we're looking at, in our targeted, we're still looking at what must they know and be able to do. Now that they're getting targeted and focused support, and those two words are critical. It is focused and it is targeted, because number one on here, are students performing, where are they performing now, and where do we want them to be? That ongoing assessment leads us to number two, that goal that we should have. So many times when students are pulled, it's like a life sentence. They're here, they're kind of making progress. There's not an urgency. In some cases, I have not seen an urgency for this is what the students need to know and be able to do. I want to make sure I am clear and I am supporting them as they need to be supported to make sure that they will be where we want them to be at a time when they can be there. Students are going to vary, number of repetitions, but they will be where they need to be. I'm very clear on what they need. So how long do we have to get them there? That's part of that plan. Then we're looking at their growth. Do we have a growth target for them? How much do they grow? How much do they need to grow per year or per month to get there? And then number 5 plays into that. What resources do I need to make sure they are there? So tier 2, a different animal than tier 1 in that now, even though we're progress monitoring in tier 1, now we are really focusing on what does this student need to know and be able to do based on my error analysis. I know the gen ed in the core instruction, I know what they must know and be able to do. But with this student, he's having trouble with not being able to do X or Y. Now I'm focusing on that. That's that focused and targeted supplemental support. The assessment is progress monitoring. It says 1 time a month. I would do that. As teachers, we're progress monitoring. What I would say there is we are progress monitoring as much as we need to monitor to make sure that student is making the success, or making the improvements and having the success that we expect. So if they need to be at a certain place and we're on track for that, we may be progress monitoring a lot more than once per month. Again, your tier 2 program is evidence-based for supplemental instruction, and it is again implemented as it is intended or designed. And then lastly, tier 3, like I mentioned the student before, and this is not special education, but like I mentioned before, you have the core, the supplemental. Now we have that intensive individualized support. We're really drilling down now to a very, very few students. You know, we talk about the 80, the 15, and the 5 loose percentages, but few students. Again, what must they know and be able to do? So are we making progress towards the benchmark? And are we monitoring that progress? And when they're not making progress, changing our approach. Now, we might be using we certainly should be using a program that's evidence-based. That being said, the way I deliver the evidence-based program may need to change what I'm doing with that child, the child, and the activities I have. That's going to change based on the child, and that's where that individualization, easy for me to say, comes in. So how are the students performing now? Again, this is where they were. How are they performing now? Where do we want them to be? How long do we have them to get there? Again, that sense of urgency in tier 2 and in tier 3. And what supports has the child been received? And are more supports and resources needed to move that child into being more successful? Questions so far? I haven't, I just see 3 things in the chat. I'm looking over here because I have a big screen. Questions on before we...
There's no questions in the chat, but I don't know if there's, yeah.
Pop on, again, pop on if you have a question. Key elements, again, that consistent progress monitoring, that's going to be a lot more frequent if students are in tier 3. It's going to be should be an evidence-based program. It should have a history, documented history of being a strong evidence of strong success and implemented as it was designed. Those are the 3 areas of MTSS, or the 3 levels of MTSS. But what happens when that is flipped? When most of our students are not performing as we would then want them to perform? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at instruction, but we'll get into that. We call that a flip triangle or class-wide intervention. It's important in class-wide intervention. There are a couple questions to be asking. First of all, are 80% of the students we talked about that 80-20, are 80% of the students performing as expected? A lot of times people stop there when they're looking at their tier instruction, their core or tier 1 instruction. They stop with that, and that's okay. But if it is really strong, we're going to answer 3 more questions, and hopefully we're going to answer them successfully or to our students' advantage. Are 80% or more of the students performing as expected? At the end of the year, or in the spring, are 95% of that 80%, 95% of those students who are meeting grade level expectations, are they still meeting grade level expectations? Question 3, are the student groups, is there a marked difference in student groups, the data we have on student groups being successful? Free and reduced and let's say Hispanic or Black or Asian. We want to make sure that those groups are at least similar, because if they're disparate, if we have one that's way out there and not being as successful, then we need to look at that. So question 3, are the student groups pretty much on par or together, or is there a big difference in one? And question 4, are the students who are identified for special education at or above the state average? So those 4 are critical questions to really take the temperature of our tier 1 health, so to speak, our tier 1 program, core program. When that's not the case, when 40% or more of our students are not performing as expected, that's when class-wide intervention comes into play. That's a really flipped triangle when we see that 40% or more of our students are not performing as they should. So the flipped triangle is, well, you can see it's opposite of what we had before. Majority of the students are needing intervention. We can't intervene our way out of a poor core 1 or tier 1 core instruction, core level supports. So when I go to schools, they say we have so many students that are struggling, and it's this, what you see, it's that flipped triangle. And that's looking at core 1 or tier 1. I asked them right away, so let's take a look at what's happening in the classrooms. So majority of the students needing intervention, core instruction may not be good or implemented with fidelity. And when it says may not be good, a good match, that means that we are probably not only, we're not clear on what they must know and be able to do, and we're not using our data, error analysis, for students, groups of students, and specific students to know that this is what they need. And when I implement this tier 2 program, for example, or even classroom interventions, I'm not doing what I'm providing is not meeting what they need, because I didn't really analyze what the errors were for that student. Oh. And then maybe it's always been flipped. I would like your responses on this. What does yours look like? On the left, we have 80, 15, and 5 going from bottom to top. On the second one, we have 5, 15, and 80. Just the opposite. That's truly the flip. On number 3, you in a class of or a school of 450, you'd have 150, 150, 150. So 150 students at tier 1, 150 students at tier 3 are really needing intense intervention. And number 4, I don't know where we are. We're all over the place. So put in the chat. Are you, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4 from left to right. 1, 2, 3, or 4.
There is a 2, 2, a couple of 2 so far.
Some people don't want to admit. That's where I'd be. I think no, not necessarily. It's tough. That's why you're on here, and that's okay. There's so many variables: behavior, attendance, um, changing standards. At this point, we have any others?
No, I just saw 2 2s so far.
Right.
Maybe people are thinking and processing.
Hey, I would be too. As a principal, I would be. Boy, that number 4 looks pretty inviting. Sometimes where we are, and that's the purpose of this. You really, schools really need to analyze where they are. Take a hard look. It's tough to look in the mirror sometimes. You don't always like what you see, and but it's necessary, if especially for the moral and ethical responsibilities we have for students. Okay, so what happens if your triangle is like that? Obviously, we're going to look at tier 1. We're going to want to strengthen that. We're going to have to consider additional data. What do I mean by that? Well, it could be such things as attendance. If you have a lot of students who are missing a lot of days for whatever reason, that's the problem. So look for patterns. Patterns would be, when I work with schools, we look at cohort data. So I'm not just looking at 3rd grade each year. Those are different groups of students. I'm looking at 3rd graders this year, 4th graders, those same students, 4th graders the year after that, 5th graders. Is there a trend there in 4th grade? They're always dipping. Is that a mismatch of curriculum alignment, curriculum instruction? Is an issue with instruction itself in their PLCs, how they're analyzing student data? So we're going to look for patterns in our flip triangle. And then that's why we want to provide those class-wide interventions. And when I say class-wide interventions, I'm not talking about interventions for particular students. I'm talking about what we're going to do when 40% of those students or more are not performing as expected, responsive to instruction. So, some questions again. What's our benchmark data show? 80%. This is a repeat, but it bears repeating that evidence-based and fidelity, that's so easy to overlook day to day. We sometimes we skip out. We shortchange some of the steps that we should be following within our curriculum, and that's gonna you're gonna see the results of that. And is our tier 1 salvageable? Do we need to supplement? And again, that's based on your data. You're looking at those other factors. You're looking at those patterns, looking for those patterns. So what do we do if we don't have a solid tier 1? Well, first of all, the problem with that is that we see that access to highly effective instruction or high quality teaching using high level practices, for example, that may be something that's not happening. And when that's the case, students are not getting that equitable access for instruction. It's a tough thing for principals. I was a principal, and tough thing when you have a teacher that you would not want your own child, whose class you would want your own child not to be in. That's tough. And that's incumbent on us as building leaders to make sure, first of all, we're supporting that person, providing high levels of support, but also high expectations. And when they can't meet that expectation, that's tough. But that's equitable access to highly effective instruction. We could sometimes we change that criteria. Okay, well, they're not where they should be, but that's okay. We're going to change that criteria, and so that they're doing okay. And screening results, sometimes we over-identify students who are marginalized students or minority groups. We have that disproportionality where we're using those screening results ineffectively. So sometimes we can change those, change that criteria to get access to intervention. And I've seen some schools do that just to get Title I funding, more Title I funding, which is not really ethical. But anyway, so it is a matter of equitability, making sure all students get what they need and they deserve. So you've been quiet. I want to know what your thoughts are, please, so far as we have gone through MTSS as we know it, pretty much that 30,000 foot view, but now we're going to get into 1.5 specifically. How many of you, just indicate yes or no, have a need, not talking it would be okay, have a pressing need for 1.5 class-wide intervention? 40% or less of the students are meeting expectations in the class. Just put yes or no. We're not tracking you, so we're not going to report it to anybody.
John, in the chat, there's 3 yeses and 1 no.
Okay. Consistently or continually taking your temperature, or us taking our temperature when it comes to how we are doing, is so important, because it is so easy for us to, without recognizing it, slowly, it's like the frog in the water, we just get used to it, and pretty soon we don't know that we didn't know that we were falling. So it's good that you always ask those questions that I posed earlier, that 80%, 95% are student groups pretty much equal. And number 4, what's our student special education percentage compared to the state average? So those 4 are always taking your temperature. Why class-wide intervention? Well, first of all, we can reach more students. And the way we do that is through students working together, peer-assisted learning. So in some regards, we're going to save time. Now, when I say save time, students are working together. That does not give us license then not to be monitoring what they're doing and taking notes of how they're doing. Looking at specific students and hearing, oh, I didn't know that. I need to remember that. And that might be a quick mini lesson, intense mini lesson, just on that struggle that John is having over here. So saves time, but it also gives us a chance then to be more interactive with more students at one time. Low impact on resources, because it's happening within your classroom with what you have, essentially. And hopefully it's that, again, that word prevention, MTSS, we're preventing future issues for a student. When I said MTSS is responsive, boy, that's the key. And responsive, not tomorrow or the next day, that immediate response. We want to make sure that right away when we see there's an issue, we address that issue for a student. So it does prevent future difficulties. Class-wide intervention especially can do that. reduces then the number of students who need that advanced support, the targeted or intensive support. And it has been shown to have a positive effect on both students who are performing at grade level, even exceeding that, as well as students who are struggling or lower performing students. Here are some terms that you might be familiar with when it comes to peer-assisted learning strategies. Started, as you can see, started a long time ago, and it has gained a little bit more popularity now. I've seen it, more schools talking about it. 1991, we called class-wide peer tutoring, peer-assisted learning strategies, and then Spring Math, which was started by the authors there. That happened in the early 2000s, and we're going to talk about Spring Math. What we'll be looking at, moving into some specifics and strategies for you, we're going to be looking at reading and mathematics. So what's class-wide intervention? Boy, having trouble tonight. In reading, the examples we will look at for class-wide intervention are partner reading, retell, paragraph shrinking, and a thing called prediction relay. We're going to look at how those will help with fluency and comprehension. That being said, remember the precursors for that fluency. We have to make sure, as we're providing additional support to students, we're looking at that, the ability to decode and rapid word recognition to get to that fluency. So we still have those fundamental steps of rapid letter naming, phonemic awareness, multisyllabic, being able to decode multisyllabic words, that leading to that reading fluency, and then that comprehension. And so these, when we do this, you'll see that it is resources we'll need are at the lower performing students level. But these four that we're going to look at, these four strategies, partner reading, retell, paragraph shrinking, and prediction relay, do boost the fluency comprehension, the identification of main idea and details, as well as some prediction. I just feel like I'm talking. I wish I had people asking questions. Alana asked me a question. I'm just kidding. Alana and Nikki are on here too. I didn't mention that before. Two colleagues who graciously agreed to stay on to make sure that if technology went south, they would save me, which is a big lift. So I appreciate you, Alana and Nikki. Those are the voices you're hearing. So class-wide intervention, pairing students. We're going to use the benchmark data to order those students. So if I have students, if I give a benchmark assessment and I'm looking at 10 students, I'm going to 1 through 5, and I'm going to split between 5 and 6. So I have two halves now. I have 1 through 5 and I have 6 through 10. I'm going to create the partners by putting the students together, the highest in each group first. For example, 1 and 6, 2 and 7, 3 and 8. That's how I will pair those students. And when we begin all of these strategies, the stronger student, the more proficient student always goes first as a model. It models for the lower performing student, as well as provides a kind of a sense of security. They've already heard the reading. In this case, they're going to reread. In the case of partner reading, so that's how we create the partners. It's interesting. There's a video online. I'm going to birdwalk here, but there's a video online, and I talked about the 40% needing assistance. They in that video, they looked at students. Let's say you have an NWEA score of word recognition or word recognition, or what do I want to say? Words per minute. Let's say reading fluency. I don't know, but it's 90. So if your benchmark is 90 in the winter, for fluency, then you look at the mean of all of your scores. And if that mean is not at or above that 90, that's when you would also use class-wide intervention, and you would group the students accordingly using those numbers. So that's just another way that you can group students, and another way that you can see that you need a class-wide intervention. I forgot to mention that before. So key to this, as it is in any classroom, we teach the procedures. We teach the vocabulary. Here's what I mean by this. Here's what this means, and we teach those procedures. We provide for them and for each other. We teach them to provide very explicit instruction on corrections. You'll see that they have little charts for that. And this allows students to practice more with guidance from peers. And it increases not only the opportunity for feedback, but it also increases students' confidence when it's done correctly. Partner reading, first of all, I'll talk about what this is in a moment. I'll show you the components of that. This one is a little hard to hear. The rest of them are not that bad, so I think the volume's okay.
They always in Texas. They think UPI, UPA. Everyone knows how to miss that word. Can you figure it out? Everyone. No, that word is everybody. What word? Everybody. Good. Maybe things together. Everybody knows how Cowboys sing today in Texas. But it was not always so. Things were once quiet once in Texas. Long ago, cowboys were silent. Stop. Change jobs. Start. Today, cowboys in Texas. They sing yippee-yi, yippee-yi.
You notice that the students who are not reading, the partner is indicating a word or words where a student has either not read it, doesn't know it, or read the wrong word, and so they're taking notes. And I know I apologize for that being hard to hear. Partner reading is just that. It's students taking turn reading, starting with the stronger, more proficient student, and then the student with the lower proficiency, level of lower proficiency following that. When you see partner reading, it's the higher performing student reading first and the lower performing student reading the same text. Now, later on, you'll see that in some of these that they'll read text, and after a higher performing student has read, the student, lower performing student, will read on from there. It's critical in partner reading, and even with paragraph shrinking, for students to be comfortable with the process, and especially your lower performing students. A lot of times you'll see the partner reading first. Student will read, first student will read, second student will read that same text, then they will start moving on from there. So, but in retail, high performing student reads it says the first 5 minutes, a low performing, and then the low performing students it takes 1 or 2 minutes to retell the story. And there are notes on that. You're going to see in a slide in a moment. It is important, and when you look online, and I don't have time to go through those now, but you'll see that in our Padlet. There are specific questions and specific notes that the students will take for each other. And so when it includes that main idea, what you'll see with retail is the higher performing students sometimes is asking probing questions, especially as you get into middle school, upper elementary and into middle school. They're asking probing questions, but they have those notes on there. Again, that text that we're using is for the lower performing student. You can look at reading A to Z, There are a number. I'm missing one. Read, Alana, help me. They had varied levels of texts.
There's Newsella, there's ReadWorks.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, Newsella, but yeah, ReadWorks. That's, sorry, 65. I can't remember. Yeah, thank you. But those are resources where, when I talk about setting up procedures, what you might consider is having folders. And you have for retail, you have folders, and you set the procedure that if you have students A and B, A is your higher performing. Student A always goes and picks up the folder, or they alternate that, but picks up the folder. Here's where we meet. We have the queuing cards on one side. On the other side, we would have a selection of texts that we're going to read again at the level for that lower performing student. And those levels would vary based on, is it 1 and 6, or is it 9 and 6, 5 and 10? So even within those levels, that text may vary that you're going to get from ReadWorks. But those are individual folders that are set up, just something to consider as part of your procedure.
And Sean, I'm going to go ahead and throw in the chat the link to Literacy Central, where they have those leveled reading passages, where, as those of you who are teachers, you can go ahead and print out, it's a set of leveled passages. And so you can print out the 3 different level of the passages and then go ahead and put those into folders. They're already pre-made for you. If you come to the training live, if you've been to this training live before, we do one with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and that's what I'm going to share here. But it comes from Reading is Fundamentals Literacy Central website.
Thank you, Nikki.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. You know, our information will be on the last slide. We're free. Call us anytime if you have questions. Alana, Nikki, any of us, please call us anytime. And if I don't have the answer, I'll make sure I get a hold of a colleague, say in this case, Nikki or Alana, and they will contact you and they'll reach out with help. So we're happy to do that.
Choose your battles wisely. Choose your battles wisely is a popular phrase in parenting, but it is also useful for anyone who wants to live a happy life. It means life is filled with
Stop. Do you need some help with that word?
Yes.
Look at the parts of the word and say the word slowly.
Opportunities. It means life is filled with opportunities to choose between making a big deal out of something or simply letting it go. If you choose your battles wisely, you'll win the ones that are truly important. There will be times when you want or need to argue.
Stop. You made a careless error. Reread the sentence.
There will be times when you will want or need to argue, confront, or even fight for something you believe in. People who want to be happy should choose their battles wisely.
People who fight all the time are usually unhappy.
There are lots of things in life you might not like.
If you decide which battles are worth fighting, your life will be less stressful.
I don't know necessarily that I would say you made a careless error. Wouldn't do that. But the point is, you're going to have students in retail.
Choose.
You're going to have both students, the higher performing students, a student as the coach. And on this, because it was an older student, she didn't ask, but I think you should. What happened first? What happened next after that student reads? And again, the student's going to read first. The higher performing student, is more proficient student's going to read first, and the lower performing student is going to ask questions from the cue card. What happened first? What happened next? So that's going to be modeled before what you saw in the video. If they don't remember that information, then the coach will provide that. And you'll see that in partner reading, even with a miscue or a student not being able to read a word, you'll see that after they count, let's say I think it's to 4, they'll count to 4 and they'll say the word is detail. What's that word? Detail. Now let's read the sentence again. So again, the coach has those specific cues to give, and in retail, they have those cues for sequencing, for example. And then after they remind them, after being reminded, then that student will provide or use that prompt to provide the information. If the coach, after they hear that, if that's not accurate, then the coach will provide the answer, just like I used that example with the word. So I provide a prompt, student read, let's say the coach, the student is struggling, I provide a prompt, they give me a response. If that response is correct, great. If that response is not, then I'm going to provide that retail, I'm going to provide that correct answer. So partner reading, retail, they're going back and essentially retelling. One of our standards, by the way, is retelling or recognizing what is happening in that particular paragraph. And that's what they do usually they do this by paragraph and retell. This is paragraph shrinking. And again, partner reading, sometimes we start out with partner reading just so students are comfortable. So we might just read a paragraph, and then on that third paragraph, we're going to get into retell. Now that requires more time, depending on the size of the paragraphs, or if you're going to read for so many minutes. But depending on your students, they may need that level of practice, or the lower performing student may need to hear that before they engage in. So paragraph shrinking, the student reads for 5 minutes. At the end of the paragraph, then that higher performing student is going to provide the who or the what when they model that, and then they're going to summarize it in 10 words, and you'll see in the video how they do that. And then they'll switch roles, and that student, in this case, it says they pick up where they left off. Some places will say they're going to they'll reread just to practice that again. It depends on your students. The students are really struggling, but in most cases, they're going to switch roles. The lower performing student will pick up where they left off. They will read. Again, with paragraph reading, you're also providing those words if the student is struggling with a word. But the point of paragraph shrinking is not only practicing that reading, but really being able to tell the who or the what. And you're going to see a good example of that. And this is not an example as much as it is a how-to. So this is pretty valuable for you, I think.
The intervention itself is called class-wide reading, and paragraph shrinking is part of that. So the way that we set that up is we pair the students, so they have a paired reader, higher readers with a little bit lower readers. They each get a copy of the same text, and they start with the higher reader reads for 5 minutes, and then the lower reader reads the same text for 5 minutes. If there's any mistakes in that, there's a protocol for that too. It's called ask then tell. If they hear an incorrect word, they say, can you figure out this word? And they point to it. And then in their head, they count to 4. And if the student still can't figure out the word, they tell them. And the verbiage is practiced. This word is blank. What's the word? And the student has to repeat the word. And then they have to reread the sentence correctly. So after that, then they move into the stronger reader reads for 5 minutes on new text, and they stop every paragraph and do what's called paragraph shrinking. First, they tell the who or the what is the most important part of that paragraph, and then they tell the most important thing about the who or what. And then their task is to put the main idea in 10 words. So you'll see the kids using their fingers trying to come up with 10 words to tell the main idea. The students embraced it. They loved it. They loved the routine of it. After they were taught and modeled the first time, they ran with it and they did a great job.
The impact was tremendous. We implemented first with our third graders and saw over a 25-point jump in their fluency rate, specifically with their reading, which was huge just in a 2-week time frame, because that's the length that you provide this intervention. It's 2 weeks for half an hour each day.
Is anybody doing that? Yes or no in the chat? I see one response. 2. 3. Alana, Nikki, what do we have?
I see 3 no's. No one's trying it yet. I do have to share just kind of a personal story very quickly. That last spring we did this same training with the groups live around the state. And I received an email afterwards from a participant who said, I tried this for 2 weeks and cannot believe the growth that we saw at our 2nd grade level. And they were so excited to be able to implement it. And it was from a person at the training who really wasn't sure that it could work with her littles, her 2nd graders. So, think about how this could be applied in your school building or your classroom, and see if it's something that you might want to try, even just for 2 weeks with that timing, and see if it can help your data.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm glad you shared that. That being successful, I'm sure was due in large part to, even with the littles, the 2nd graders or 1st graders, is in large part to teaching the process and having those resources, those cards available, teaching them how to use it, modeling it for the students, and then having them do it and providing that feedback. Again, the teacher walking around and monitoring all the time. So yeah, thank you. You noticed in that when she presented, she talked about them reading the partner reading, and then paragraph shrinking. That was different from what you saw in the previous slide, where it was just talking about the shrinking, which is student A reads, student B reads, moves on and reads. So partner reading first, providing that sense of security, and then building onto that with your paragraph shrinking. Let's listen to another example of that with these 2 students. Maybe not. Work with me. These students do not like me, apparently. I don't know why it's not doing that. These middle school girls model that shrinking, and again, the who or the what, and it shows the student on the left is actually asking questions of the student on the right. So I apologize for that. Prediction relay. So we've gone through the paragraph, the partner reading. We've talked about retell, being able to retell what that paragraph was about. The shrinking, where we get into not just the overall retell of it, but getting into specifically the who or the what, and then summarizing that in 10 words or less. Prediction relay, similar in the summary of 10 words or less, but in this case, the reader's going to make a prediction of what will happen on the next half of the next half page. It's important, obviously, that they have context going into that. They might look at the picture, they might want to use some of those picture cues, but it is important for them to have a context of what's happening, so that, cause and effect. I see what's happening now, so I believe because of this, I believe this. So, but the reader makes a prediction about what will happen next, then reads the half a page, and then checks to see if their prediction was correct. Proficient reader doing this first in modeling. The student who is less proficient follows up after that. And again, that's that 10-word main idea in 10 words or less with that summary. So questions on reading. Boy, you're quiet as a group. I wish we were in person. Okay. Class-wide interventions in math, you don't see as many resources for this, although it does happen. Matthew Burns is a person you can Google online and does a lot with. He's a professor out of, I can't remember. But you'll see, he'll talk about math intervention as well as reading intervention. But you're looking at it specifically, certain skills that are on here, you'll see more resources for. That's number recognition, comparing the numbers, addition, subtraction, place value, and I'm not going to read those to you, but those specific areas are where you can use that. The important thing to remember with math skills is that that proficient student is asking specific questions for the student, the lower performing student. First, they're modeling. For example, let's say they're looking at number recognition. You might have five numbers or numerals, not numbers, but numerals. And they would say, what's the number? 5. What's the number? 2. What's the number? 3. What's the number? 8. Random numbers. And then when the lower performing student is doing it, then the higher performing student would say, what's the number? 2. What's the number? That number is 6. So what's the number? 6. And moving on. So, and then of course, it's much more complicated with place value or missing addends and so forth. If you look online, you will see resources for that, even aligning numbers with in your place value, even the prompt to align numbers correctly, the ones, the tens, and so forth. And those are prompts provided by that higher performing student. So again, for students who are struggling in math, and you're going to look at your data to see who those students are, and you're going to pair them just like you did with reading. It's important then that just like with reading, that the teacher models this for all students, models what that coaching is going to look like, models what the process is going to look like, sets expectations for being on task and what they are to do, as well as the outcomes that are expected. You're going to use, depending on the skill that you're working on, a variety of materials, and so it's incumbent and important on the teacher that that teacher has the materials necessary so that it's right there. It does provide a lot of opportunities to respond. It provides that engagement that keeps students not just hands-on, but minds-on. It's easy to be hands-on. We want them engaged mentally, so that those increased opportunities for response provides that minds-on learning. And it's particularly effective when you have goals set for a student, or they set those goals for themselves with your assistance, and then they're monitoring, self-monitoring that. That would be especially important in your upper grades. You get that error correction from peers, and that error correction, that feedback is immediate, just like it was in reading. Critical in mathematics as well. And in some cases, you can have class-wide, I don't know why I'm stumbling that, class-wide rewards for students making progress or meeting their goals. So think alouds. These are ingredients that you want to consider. Here we were looking at what the skills might include or how we might use this class-wide intervention or peer assisted learning in math as a class-wide intervention for math. But now we're looking at specific ingredients. And that's that guided practice. Think alouds. Think alouds are critical in mathematics. They are in reading for comprehension as well. In mathematics, that think aloud, that coach, that higher performing student, allowing the lower performing student to process that mathematical. For example, I see that I have 10 ones. Is there anything I can do with the 10 ones? Oh, I can regroup that into a 10. That is so critical. And again, that requires instruction for the coach, access to resources to prompt that coach to know what to say or questions to ask and so forth. But those think alouds are critical. A lot of opportunities to respond, and it's going to be based on the level of that task, that level of difficulty. You're going to have to have more resources for your student, your coach, as that level of difficulty increases. You're going to be targeting those skills just like you did in reading. Reading was a little bit more general. You were looking at comprehension. In retail, you want to look for main ideas. You want to be specific about how to find main ideas, what main ideas are, what those details are. In this case, you're going to be looking at specific math skills, and that may be skills within skills. In addition, multi-digit addition, again, that regrouping. So you may be looking at specific skills within that larger skill of computation. Gives them not only a practice, but a chance when they set their goal, a chance to beat that score. It also decreases that time, that error time when a student makes an error, decreases the time between that and the correction, because that correction is immediate. You get that prompt feedback or that direct feedback quickly. And then you might have a delivery, you might have an award. That would be another ingredient. Again, if you're going to set those goals, to have a reward for the class. And these are ideas that are provided. The most important idea behind math, peer assisted learning in mathematics, is having the materials, making sure the students understand the procedures, and making sure that you have especially for the coach, but for all students, having the students access to and familiarity with those materials for coaching and providing those probing questions in mathematics. In behavior, with the time that we have a little bit of time. There are 3 games: good behavior game, the mystery motivator, and some OTR, opportunities to respond, techniques that we can use. So let's take a look at first of all, how many people are using one of these? Good behavior, mystery motivator in particular. Yes, 1, no, 2. I changed it up, didn't I? Yes, 1, no, 2. Give us a number. You're using one of these games. Yes, 1, no, 2. I wish I had the music for Jeopardy. Do that quickly.
I'm seeing 1 yes and 3 no's in the chat, John.
Okay. For the 1 yes, which one are ones? Good behavior game, OTRs, mystery motivator?
Leroy says opportunities to respond.
OTRs, okay, good. Well, when I get to that, we're gonna turn it over to that person. They can explain how to do that. Just kidding. Thank you. Thanks for feedback on that. I will say, in this hour and a half, the 90 minutes, we're rapidly going through that 30,000 view of MTSS, what it is, how we get into that 1.5, what prompts us to go to that class-wide intervention, and then using specific examples of reading, and particular ones in reading, the partner reading, retell, paragraph shrinking, and so forth, and then the mathematics. To do that, you have to be able to reach them to teach them. To get to that point, we have to make sure the behavior is in place. Behavior not only for preventing misbehavior, but promoting learning, even with good behavior. In other words, on task, engagement. So that these class-wide interventions for behavior, especially when there's an issue, but all the time, that culture within the classroom is important to get to the reading, to get to the math, to make progress in both of those, making sure that culture where students develop over time, develop that self-regulation where it's self-discipline. And ultimately, we want to get to the point where a new student comes into the class and does something, another student says, no, we don't do that here. We're not going to do that. Mr. Purcell, no, we're not going to do that to him. So we want that self-regulation, self-discipline. So let's look at a couple examples. Good behavior game. 1 to 2 hours a day, you're going to make sure you identify specific behaviors, such as out of your seat, like it says on here. Whatever behaviors, especially if you're having an issue with behavior. If you have community circles in the morning where your students, hopefully you're doing it with a purpose when you meet. First of all, and the purpose to prevent behavior, by the way, is to front load students. And when you're sitting together, hey, we're not going to have all of music today because we have an assembly. You're front loading those students, and you can up front remind them of what you expect in behavior or what they should expect of one another in that setting. So at that same time, you can identify a specific area where you've had issues or the students have had issues. That can be the target then of your negative behavior or what you want to address in your game. You're going to look at what rewards you want for that and have them divided into teams, and the team with the lowest score is going to win. So the fewest misbehaviors, and you're going to have rewards for those students. And it's important that this is done in a positive competitive way rather than a negative competitive way. You want the students really to be pulling for each other, supporting each other, and you have to model that. You have to explain that. How do you support students when a student is not behaving? How does coaching, again, with a coach, having other students say, hey, that's okay. This time you did that. Hey, here's what we're going to do next time. So, but you teach the game to the class, you divide them into those teams, and then you set those rewards. Questions on that? That was a quick explanation. You can find a lot more details online, but it has been used. I was in a school and I mentioned, we were talking about discipline, and I mentioned the good behavior game, just popped out of my mouth, and it's something they wanted to try. So they went online, found some information on it, and tried that. I need to get back with them and see how that's working. But they liked that idea. That principal liked that idea. Questions on that? Mystery motivator. All right. Whereas the other one was so many hours a day, here you're looking at 40 minutes a day. You're going to determine how long you're going to play that motivator. You're going to define a replacement behavior, what to do and what they're not to do and what they're to do instead. Again, that is something that target should be something that has been an issue within the class, or something that you anticipate that may become an issue given the time of year. For example, leading up to Christmas, kids getting excited. every year we have such and such happening. Every year we have students that are rambunctious, for lack of a better term, but they're not following procedures in lining up and so forth. So you're going to look at specific behaviors, and you're going to then make sure they understand what that replacement, here's what the misbehavior looks like, here's our target, and here's what that expected behavior looks like. And you want to determine what you're going to look at your baseline. You want to determine what that cutoff is going to be. You can use visual reinforcements, which are critical in my opinion, because even with academics, where you can say, look at step number 5. What's that? All right, I'll be right back in a minute, but move on from step number 5 though. Let's say in mathematics, you're going to add, right? All right, I'll be right back. You can do the same thing with behavior. Have that visual. That's critical. Look at what we expect. What do we expect? They repeat it. Okay. You have a reward envelope with that. And those rewards can be something free time. There are a number of things you can use depending on your students. It really depends on your school, what your school allows as far as rewards and expectations. But it can be playing a game with the principal, something that I've experienced. And so anyway, you create that reward envelope, and then you have a calendar with mystery motivator or dates about 60% of the days. So you're going to format that calendar with the mystery motivator, and have those dates about 60% of those days. Mystery motivator is something that I have not seen. I've seen the good behavior game in action, or talked to another principal where they were using that. Not the one I talked about before. I was going to try it, but I've not seen mystery motivator. I'd like to see that. And so if one of you put that in action, I'd love to hear back from you. You're going to teach that mystery motivator. You're going to teach it to the students. Make sure you record those behaviors, keep track of that. Let them know that, reveal that, what that date is on the calendar, and then to provide that feedback, reward, and encouragement. That the important thing is to follow up on that targeted behavior, to always be reminding them and then following up with, especially if they reach that goal or if they're successful, to set that as an expectation moving forward. Hey, we've done this. Now I know we can always do it. So you're going to provide that encouragement. Opportunities to respond. Sometimes you hear as OTR. There are a lot of ways you can do that. Again, just same as with reading, mathematics, and with behavior, the other 2 behaviors games that we've talked about. It's teaching students how to do it, how to respond. What does fist to 5 mean? Sometimes they'll talk about bars, fist to 5, but they'll talk about bars on my cell phone. I don't understand it at all. I kind of understand it. I have seen it before, and so forth, all the way up to I can probably teach it better than you, number 5. But again, bars on the cell phone. Think, pair, share, square is kind of cool. You want to be specific on think, pair, share, that students know what that looks like. And that's where think alouds and modeling can help. I've seen think, pair, share where they're sharing information, but it's incorrect. And again, that's where the teacher moving around is so important. But you want to model what that's going to look like in the OTRs. But using think, pair, share is important. But again, make sure you're teaching that. Like, learned, wondered. Here's what I liked. Here's what I learned. Here's what I'm still wondering. That is critical for your, critical thinking, for your metacognition, to identify the questions that you still have. I like that. I like that part of it. But wondering is critical. That's the executive functioning. So that's a great OTR process or technique. Using technology, and then voting with your feet. Again, expectations. You don't want chaos to break out. So, but voting with your feet is another way to actively engage students in responding. Worse than any of these, even if vote to your feet gets a little bit, I won't say out of hand, but rambunctious at first, you have the chance then to make sure students understand what the expectations are. Any of those are better than sit and get. Students just sitting and listening and not having that expectation. We know that expectations are response is huge. Here are some response apps. Given the time that we have, I'm going to move on to some engagement strategies. I'm looking at this screen because it's bigger and my old eyes can read it. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you see the Think, Pair, Share. You see the graffiti wall, or the graffiti wall. Response cards, even using response cards. These are all engagement strategies that you can use, and I have seen a number of these being used. Jigsaw is huge. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Using the jigsaw approach for engagement is very, very successful. The impact, when we look at effect sizes, you'll see it in studies, but John Hattie is known for effect sizes, predominantly known for that. If you have a negative effect size in a study, and these are studies, meta-analysis of many studies, and studies that were done based on analysis, proper analysis. In other words, it might have been a controlled study, random controlled. These are not just any thought and opinion. These are actual studies when they do this. But when it's between 0 and 0.15, you're looking at what they could do without schooling. In red, it's going to have a negative effect. Typical effects would be that 0.15 to 0.4, and you're going to see these numbers in a moment. When you get to that 0.4, that's where you want them making. That's hopefully they're going to make more than 1 year of growth, and you have that high effect size on from these studies. The important thing is when you're using the techniques from these studies, there are a lot of variables. For the sake of time, I have fewer questions than what I had before, but I'm going to pop a quiz your way. This is called opportunity to respond. A, B, or C, effect size for ability grouping for gifted students. Well, A, B, or C, let's put that in the chat in the next several minutes that we have. We're going to do this quiz. Effect size, again, anything 0.4 and above is more than a year's growth. What do we have, Nikki or Alana?
Yeah, 1 vote for B.
1 vote?
Yep,
This is
that's all. 1 response for B.
okay. This is an OTR. This is where you're supposed to respond, by the way. Any others?
I do think, John, I think some people are driving. I see a couple more Bs now. Thank you to those of you responding. I think some people are maybe driving.
Oh, but
It is that time of day where people are heading home from work.
hey, please don't. Former
Okay.
police officer, don't do that. Nobody wants to be called out for an accident.
Yeah.
That is correct. 0.3. Is that bad? No. It's like I said, the caveat is how are you doing that? What's that look like? You really have to get into the details of the studies to see what specifically worked and what did not work, what the findings were. Overall, it's 0.3. Effect size for feedback. A, B, or C. And again, if you're not driving, I appreciate you participating. I could see somebody driving saying, "Hey, it's A, it's A."
And that's what they're saying in the chat. I have 2 for A so far.
I just threw A out there. I'm not saying that's the answer.
One for C. And another one for A.
It is A. And again, with feedback, let me give you an example. I mean, there's a lot that goes into feedback very quickly. There's what we call inhibiting and promoting a response. Promoting response is I go by a student, their students are working with some guided instruction. I see a student and I say, oh, remember that the 0 has to be at the edge of your whatever, that first mark. Remember to start your ruler on the 0. Okay, and then you move on. That's encouraging. That's a productive feedback. Inhibiting feedback would be, that's not how you measure. You're not using the ruler correctly. That's feedback, but it's inhibiting. So a lot goes into, when it says the effect size, a lot goes into this. So effect size of homework, A, B, or C.
Lots of A's, John.
What's that?
Lots of letter A's. 4 in the chat say letter A so far for this one.
Correct. Again, it depends on how your homework's designed. Some homework can be effective, all in how it designs, but overall, with meta-analysis on those studies, it's 0.29, so it's lower. Now, which of these, which of these has the highest effect size? A, B, C, D, or E? Jigsaw method, students doing breaking up, taking different parts of an article, reading it, and reporting back to it. Response to intervention, you know what that is, immediately intervening for a student that needs. Collective teacher efficacy, all teachers believing not only that students can succeed, but believing that they have the ability to do that and following through with that. Self-reported grades, you know what that is. And then teacher estimates of achievement. That doesn't mean they guess what a student can do. They believe what the student is capable of, and then they design the instruction accordingly. What do we have,
In the
Vicki?
chat, I have a couple votes for C.
Very good. Somebody's doing their homework. You know, they're all great. They all have high effect sizes, but yeah, C is extremely high. Critical for a building leader. I don't know if we have any principals on here, but critical for a building leader to develop that within the staff. And yeah, that's all I'll say. As principals, we own that. So other impact, and the reason I'm quizzing you on these and I'm showing you these, we've looked at peer assisted learning strategies for reading, different types of reading strategies, and in mathematics. Went through those in 90 minutes, not enough to really get into detail, but to whet your appetite. The point of this is peer tutoring, behavior intervention programs, you can read those on your own, is to be aware of what is effective based on meta-analysis, analysis of many studies, investigating that and using that. And if you're doing it, especially at grade levels or as a school, all the better. But if third grade teachers are committed to, for example, summarization and know what that looks like when it's successful, they're going to use that, especially if they're using the retail, for example, in peer assisted learning. Okay, it's 5:30. Next steps. What can you? Yeah, easy for me to do. What's one thing you can do tomorrow to share something from today, what you've seen today? And what is one idea of using tier 1.5 or classroom-wide intervention to support students next year? These slides this program will be available, the slides will be available to you in the Padlet. So please take what you learned today or tonight in the short time or you've been exposed to. Take that and please use something for your students in a preventative, proactive, and responsive way. Research, and then I do need feedback, please, feedback on how tonight went in the 90 minutes, very quick for a lot of content. And then you can register for additional trainings with the Technical Assistance Center. We provide a lot of assistance. If you need technical assistance for your school, reach out to us. I've been at a couple schools this month, and I was talking to one on the phone today that I'll be in April several times, following up from supports I had last year. So please, no cost to you. Make sure you sign up for additional trainings or ask for assistance. Here's contact information. Patrick, again, not here tonight. He's a great guy. Hopefully you'll meet him at some point. And there's my contact information. Questions that you have, I'm a minute over. Post those questions in the chat. If you don't have questions, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight. Your time is valuable. It means a lot to me. I hope this has been somewhat beneficial to you, at least. And boy, I just wish you the best. It's tough to be in schools at this stage of the game, especially when you get in the spring. So thank you for being here. Sincerely appreciate that. If you have any questions, please post those in the chat. Nikki, Alana, I appreciate your help on that.